Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Reading the Red. This Tuesday, rainy, windy, blowy morning. You're going to definitely need to stay dry today. Matthew chapter 13, verse 40. Jesus continues with this tares and the wheat and the explanation to the characters. Now today, he takes us into what these characters or representations or these imageries of his story are how they're gonna play out. And in verse 40 we read, "So just as the tares are gathered up and burned with fire, so shall it be at the end of the age." So just as the tares are gathered up, these, as it were, seed that really weren't seed, they were imposters, they were presenting themselves like seed, they gave the impression that they was seed, but in fact they were imposters, they were enemies, they weren't sowing wheat that was going to be good and purposeful, they were seed that was actually rubbish, really bad, things that were going to ultimately bring destruction to life, not good things. They looked like it was going to bring a good harvest, but actually they brought, as it were, a bad harvest. They brought a load of, as it were, no good things worth keeping, nothing, no good for anything, actually. And Jesus says, what you do with these things that are no good for anything, they gave the impression that they were, but they weren't. And so they're no good for anything, even though they've been growing alongside the wheat. They're no good for anything. And he says these things that are no good for anything, meaning there's nothing good in them that's worth retaining. They're going to be gathered up. And at the end of the age, that's the end of all things, the summing up of all events. I wonder, do we think like that there's going to be an end? Historically, we used to think that there was going to be an end. We used to think that there was going to be some kind of retribution to the lives that we lived. People used to think in the world that there would be a judgment and that somehow there would be a kind of a summing up of their values and their life, and you're going to be maybe weighed on a scale and seen if they weighed this way or they weighed that way. And many religions are built around that, where they're going to say, well, you're going to go on, all that you are is going to go on the scale, and you're going to be weighed against what God considers your good deeds and your bad seed. And that kind of thinking is a historic reality. Now, as a Christian, from a biblical perspective, that kind of thinking doesn't exist. The truth is that our good cannot outweigh our bad. And so when the summing up of all things takes place, the end of the age, when God evaluates, what he's going to do on that evaluation day is to assess whether or not there is any good thing in us. And the good thing that God is talking about isn't our representation of good, how we value good, but how he values good. And how does God value good? Well, God values good in the light of the life that Jesus represented of himself, as it were, not just good, but God good, the very good of God. And we will be weighed and measured against God's good ways, not ours, not our standards, God's standards. And how do we fare against God's standards? And that reality of having nothing good of God in us is an implication of what happens to us at the end of the age, in the summing up of all things. And we've run out of time, so we'll call it a day, and we'll see you tomorrow.